They perform the 7 essential functions that all animals have to do to stay alive. As we've seen, there's a wide variety of animals that you find in phylum Mollusks, right? So we're just going to use clams as our representative mollusk, and then you guys are doing the clam coloring, right? So you're going to use the clam as a representative mollusk. So the digestive system. In mollusks, they have a complete digestive system. Okay, so they have one-way digestive system, mouth, anus, that is complete. Okay, so they have mouth, esophagus, stomach, intestine, and then waste exits out the anus. They do have a radula, okay, in order to either drill through things like clamshells, or they will use their radula to scrape algae off of rocks, or they'll have a beak, like in cephalopods, will have a beak in order to tear pieces off of their food. Bivalves are filter feeders, so they trap food with their gills. So they have a siphon that they pull water in, and then the water goes over their gills where they get oxygen, but then they also trap food, like phytoplankton and zooplankton and detritus, all of that stuff that's in the water. Okay, they filter it out and eat it. Their respiratory system, they have gills. Okay, so if they're aquatic mollusks, like the ones that we're interested in, they all have gills in order to survive. Terrestrial mollusks will have their mantle really highly folded, right? And then they will rely on that folded mantle in order to do gas exchange. In order to do that, they have to remain moist. It has to remain kind of wet. And if that also means, though, that if they get too wet, then they can drown, which is one of the reasons why you see, like, snails, when it rains, they all come up onto the pavement, right? They're trying to not drown. So.
But they can drown, like, not in water?
Well, in water. So they come up onto the pavement to try and avoid drowning from all of the water from the rain. The snails.
Worms do that?
Worms do that too, yeah. Because they can drown as well.
They live in the dirt.
Because they live in the dirt.
That's why after it rains, there's always worms.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Yeah. A clam has incurrent and excurrent siphons, or inhalant or exhalant, same thing. So they have two siphons. So water comes in through the inhalant siphon, passes over the gills where it exchanges oxygen, picks up carbon dioxide, and then exits out of the exhalant siphon. And then the gills will also filter out the food. After the food gets filtered out, they have these two things called palps that they will actually take, and those little palps will form the food into a little ball and pass it up to the mouth, which is like right here. Okay, so takes all of that food and passes it on to the mouth. So that's where gas exchange is going to take place for clam. Okay, they do have an open circulatory system. Do you remember annelids? Okay. Circulatory system that annelids have. Oh, it's good. So that meant that their blood was always contained in blood vessels, right? Okay. Well, in an open circulatory system, you still have a heart and you'll still have some blood vessels, but the blood does not remain in blood vessels the entire time. It will pass through these things that are called sinuses, which are basically cavities that the organs are located in. So you have like the heart will pump, and the blood will go through arteries until it gets to one of these sinuses where it'll leave the artery and kind of bathe the internal organs in blood, okay, and then exchange oxygen and then enter back into a vessel to go back to the heart.
We have sinuses.
Huh?
We have sinuses.
You do have sinuses, yes, it's true. Kind of. Okay. Their excretory system. Oh, sorry. So you can see here's your heart, okay, and then here's the blood vessels pumped down to the foot, where then it leaves the blood vessels, bathes the muscles of the foot, and then goes back, right, in a vein. So there are cavities in the body that they will use to bathe their internal organs in blood. The excretory system, they have kidneys, okay, nephridia for like kidneys, that will remove any metabolic waste that they have or that they produce from just everyday metabolic processes. And so the kidneys will dump any excretory waste into the excrement siphon, and then that will be exited out of the body. And digestive waste also goes out the anus, which also gets dumped into the excrement cycle. Okay, so food and oxygen come in, any digestive and metabolic wastes go out the excrement cycle. Nervous system. So bivalves have a very reduced nervous system. They don't really have a head. Okay. They have a few ganglia, but that's it. Okay. So ganglions and nerves, and that's it. Gastropods also have a fairly basic nervous system, but cephalopods have a very well-developed nervous system. They've got well-developed eyes. They've got statocysts in order to help them balance. They've got chemical receptors, touch receptors, all sorts of different things. And cephalopods have such a well-developed nervous system that they can actually learn and remember things. So like an octopus, if you give an octopus like a jar, like a screw top jar, and like put their food in there and then give it to them, they can figure out how to unscrew that jar and then get in and get their food. And then they'll remember how to do it. So it's cool. They can learn, which is awesome. Okay. The musculoskeletal system. So the mollusks will move using their foot. Okay, bivalves, they have 2 shells and then 1 foot, and then they can use that foot in order to dig into the sand and to anchor themselves in the sand. Bivalves also, though, can retract that foot inside of their shells and then close their 2 shells nice and tight to try and protect themselves. So they can pull that foot back in. Gastropods have stomach foot, and they just kind of slide along on that ventral foot. How many of you have seen, like, a snail as it goes across the concrete? And you've seen like the trail behind it, okay? Yeah, slide. So they basically secrete mucus and then pull themselves along like this little mucus trail with their foot.
Supposed to like help them slide.
Yeah, it's supposed to help them slide.
Why do they have these like spaces in between snail trails sometimes? Like there's nothing.
Yeah, well,
Never tried.
they could have stopped you for a little while.
Just like take a little step.
I don't think it took a little step, but yeah.
Oh, they have 1 foot, so you can jump. Batman.
All right, cephalopods have a head-foot region. Okay, the head and the foot combined together. They move with jet propulsion, and then their foot is their tentacles and arms that they'll use for feeding. So they move with jet propulsion. So. Okay, the reproductive system. They have separate sexes, so you have boy snails and girl snails. Boy squid and girl squid. And depending on the type of mollusk, they will either do internal fertilization or external fertilization. External fertilization will be done by like bivalves and gastropods. Okay? And so the males are going to release the sperm into the water, and then the female will trap the sperm and fertilize the eggs. Internal fertilization will be done by cephalopods, so and some of the terrestrial gastropods. So they'll actually copulate, the male will pass the sperm to the female, and she will take that sperm and fertilize the eggs with it. All right. So just depends on the kind of mollusk. Okay. So the ecology of mollusks. Why are they important in the ocean food chains? We actually use bivalves to check pollution levels. So bivalves are filter feeders, right? Clams and barnacles, or not barnacles, scallops, stuff like that, are filter feeders. So they're filtering the water, so they encounter toxins first. Okay, so they are going to be good indicators for the pollution level in the water, because they're going to encounter it first and filter it out. They also fall in all sorts of different levels of the food chain depending on what they're going to eat. There's limpets and gastropods are going to be primary consumers, right? Because they're going to be eating algae, and then they can be scavengers, filter feeders, carnivores, everything. They can cause damage to ships and piers. How many of you have heard of shipworm? No? Okay, shipworm is actually like a bivalve. that has like 2 shells that it uses to burrow through wood. It can actually burrow through wood and causes all sorts of damage to like wooden piers and wooden ships and stuff like that. So it costs a lot of money to replace what they damage every year. And then also they're a food source, right? Because they're delicious. So, yeah.